Good afternoon and welcome to episode 36 of 5 Reasons Not to Harm Your Loved Ones During Quarantine. I was trying to do this with a new program on my laptop, and it actually might be recording there simultaneously because it was supposed to start automatically at 1:13 for some reason, but I couldn't really tell if it was, and I didn't want to keep you waiting. So here I am. With episode 36, we're continuing our series about children in the legal system, children in court, and today we're going to talk about some of the differences between the juvenile system and the adult system. We're going to talk about the number of juveniles in detention, what it takes to be put in detention as a juvenile, which is very different goals, very different cultural factors, and very different philosophies and procedural issues that go into juveniles as opposed to adults when we're looking at them in the crime corner, as we'll call it for today. But before we get there, let's talk for a minute about COVID-19. And there are 4,674 deaths in Michigan as of yesterday at 3 o'clock. That's when the stats come in, which brings us up to 48,201 cases. And the gap between the number of cases and the number of recovered is narrowing, but unfortunately, we don't have necessarily all the data to correlate if it's truly narrowing or if it's just late reporting cases and people who were, symptoms and are now being tested. So the number of recovered cases, which means they've been symptom-free for 30 days, is 22,686. But we don't know if those 22,686 people are in the count of 48,201. This may just be on people released from the hospital. So it's, I've tried to kind of figure out the basis for the numbers now that they're reporting the recovered, and I really can't find what I think is a reliable answer. So the governor will be talking at 3 today, and she'll be talking again about her 6-part plan to put us, to open our state back up. I did post on our Facebook page an overview of that plan, and then I think she's going to also talk about things that will be opening, other industries, other retail. I don't know, I'm guessing right now, but usually, if we're going by what she said, then a little bit more will open, and people can ask their questions. And manufacturing, the big 3, did open this past Monday, which certainly all of Detroit runs on the auto industry, because if the auto industry isn't working and isn't making money, then those people aren't going to the grocery, they're not going to restaurants, they're not hiring lawyers, they're not going to doctors, they're not buying clothing. It affects every single person in Michigan if the auto industry is shut down. So this is kind of the kickstart to getting back to normal. I really hate that phrase, the new normal. I'm not sure everything was so normal before. It was just what we were used to. So anyway, other things that are, kind of new topics, ramifications of COVID-19, the schools are looking at their budgets, which ordinarily the state would cut the budget anywhere from 5 to 7% each year, depending on, it could be on census data, it could be on curriculum changes, it could be on a money issue. And this year it's anticipated for the 2021 school year that what their cuts will be greater than or up to and equal to 25%. What does that mean? That means that some of the smaller districts may be merged into bigger districts. It means that some of the charter schools or really small specialty schools will just disappear. the part of why there's a hit was because obviously we're not making as much money from for our schools from lottery tickets and sales tax when all the stores are closed. And so those are just some of the factors that they're pointing to. If you go to wxyz.com or to freep.com, you can, both of those news sources have stories that explains the school issue in more detail. Interesting enough, the governor has ordered for 2/3 of the state employees in Michigan to go on temporary layoff days, which is 2 days of furlough per 2-week pay period. It involves 31,000 people who will be temporarily laid off in that way. And this is set to go through July. And it will participate in part of the federal work share program. So it'll be funded by not just Michigan, but also by federal funds. The next thing that I wanted to talk about, and it's what we're it's our topic for today, is we're dealing with children in the legal system, children in court. And yesterday we talked about what a guardian ad litem is and child protection proceedings and in custody proceedings or divorce cases. The day before, we talked about children in court as witnesses. And so today we're going to talk about children in court if they're in trouble. And to start out, I wanted to show you all, and this is what I use to explain to my clients about the juvenile system. And I don't know if you can see that, but flowchart, and it talks about the process. And as you can see, the juvenile process can be a bit confusing. So we'll go through that really quickly and some of the choices that have to be made. And then we'll talk about the question that I'm always asked when kids are in trouble. Do I need a lawyer? And I can't tell someone when they need a lawyer, but I think that people have a kind of a misbelief that juvenile issues, juvenile crime, that it's just kid stuff and it doesn't really matter, but it really does matter. And it's something that can, follow our children and can create and eliminate a lot of opportunities for them along the way. So, first of all, before we even get to that, going through the process, I want you to remember, as people in Michigan, that many years ago now, it's probably been about 15 years, all of the juvenile mental health facilities in Michigan, except one, were closed in an effort to save money by the state. So kind of keep in the back of your mind, and we're going to talk next week is going to be like a mental health kind of week, but that we have a lot of kids with a lot of special needs. Some are mental health related, some are brain damage related, fetal alcohol syndrome, reactive attachment disorder, and those issues come into play in juvenile court much more than they do in adult court, because in juvenile court, it's individualized justice. We are looking not only at the conduct of the child, but we're also looking at who this child is. What does this child need? How is this child never here again? And making efforts to rectify whatever the shortfall is that caused the child to misbehave in the first place. And juvenile court doesn't just handle crimes on the delinquency side, as we would traditionally call them crimes. It also handles status offenses. Status offenses are truancy from home, truancy from school, curfew violations. It could be skipping school. It could be, not following the rules in your home, incorrigibility. not being compliant with teachers or parents, which also falls into the incorrigibility, running away. These are all what's called status offenses. And status offenses, for me, are really, they sound very minor when you hear them, skipping school. But those are cases for me as someone who has to, lead the way through the system. I have to do a lot of homework because I have to know if this child is doing these things because they're a bad kid, or are they in a bad situation, or do they have bad parents? And so the analysis is even more intense when you have a child who's, just doing status offense type things, as opposed to someone who's, using drugs or theft offenses or weapons offenses. And so that makes it, it's just a different approach when you have that situation. So as far as the process, children usually aren't arrested in the traditional sense where they're, the cuffs are slapped on and they're read their rights. A lot of times they are, but most of the time they're not. Most of the time there'll be some sort of discussion and they'll have to come in and turn themselves in. If they fail to voluntarily come in, then the court can issue what's called an OTTIC, which is order to take into custody. And then that child will be arrested or picked up at their home or their school or their work or wherever they are. After the arrest, one of two things can happen. They can either be released to their parents or they can be detained. If they're detained, then they have a detention hearing within 24 hours. And at that hearing, usually it's a referee, which is a lawyer who has been appointed by the judges or selected by the judges to be a hearing officer. And the referee can hear testimony, can also hear hearsay statements where like someone says this is what happened versus like what I think this happened. The referee can get background on the child and make a decision on if they can be released to their parent or if they need to continue to be detained. Depending on what county you're in, detention can look very different in this sort of pre-trial stage. The next thing that happens, and we're going to come back to detention because I have a lot of information about that. The next thing that happens is that the child would be arraigned, which is not a formal arraignment like it is in adult court. Basically what happens is the charging document in a juvenile case is called a petition. You would come to court before a referee or before a judge. You have a choice of who you want to hear your case, or if you want a jury. And you come to court and you review the petition. You can waive its reading and I review it usually with my clients and their parents. And then they know what the charges are, they understand the charges, and then we make a decision on how we're going to proceed. Are we going to go to trial, or are they going to enter a plea of some kind? Sometimes we can't make that decision that early because we don't have all the discovery. We don't have the reports, we don't have the videos, we don't have the camera from the officer's chest, the body cam, we don't have the tax report to verify the drugs are the drugs. So sometimes we have to adjourn that and make it go a little bit longer. Also, I want to go back up to the arrest for a minute. There's certain cases that when the child is arrested, charged, sent this come-in letter, that the case would be something that is aberrant behavior. It's something that is just so isolated, one time, bad judgment, and in that situation, an example might be a fight on the playground, or stealing a video game. In those situations where the child has no priors, the child may be diverted out of the formal court system and considered to be put on the consent docket or the consent calendar. And when people joke about juvenile court and they say there's super secret probation, well, this is it. This is super secret probation. There's no court file. There's no electronic record. It literally just goes poof. Now, can it ever be found? The arrest can be found. The contact can be found if the person successfully completes the diversion for consent calendar program. That program allows someone to be under the supervision of the court for 4 to 6 months informally. They have to do, usually they have to go to school. They have to have no unexcused absences, no missing assignments. They have to go to counseling, and they have to do some community service. If they do all that, it does the poof. Okay, so let's go back to the other way, because most cases go the other way. So if you decide to have a trial in one of these cases, you have a right to have a jury trial or a bench trial before a judge, or a bench trial, which is a trial without a jury, in front of the referee. If you are found not guilty, then you go immediately to a motion to expunge your record. If you are found guilty, again, the decision comes up if you're going to be released to a parent or remain detained. That there will be something called a disposition hearing. In between there'll be usually a social history kind of evaluation where someone will come to the home, someone will talk to the parents, talk to people at school, and look at school records. And this is where it's really important if the child has any sort of disability, whether it be learning disability, mental health deficit, fetal alcohol syndrome, whatever it is. This is the time that those records have to be turned over. So as soon as a child gets in trouble, you really want to start gathering all the school records, all the IEPs, if there are any, 504 plans, progress notes, and records from therapists, or if the child has been hospitalized, at Havenwick or some of the other child units affiliated with hospitals. It's really, really important, even if it was like a one-day stay. I'm sorry, there's this little annoying fly that keeps coming near me. And so that person is going to put together a report. This worker, they call them workers, social workers. Some people call them probation officers. They have different names in different jurisdictions. And they're going to put together a report, and they're going to go in front of a screening committee. And the screening committee is going to look at the report, look at the needs of the child, look at the needs of the family, and make a recommendation. And the recommendation could be that the child goes to the Department of Corrections, which is like adult, but they're special places for kids. That they go to residential placement, which may be a place like Star Commonwealth or Vista Maria, which are not necessarily completely locked down, but they have restrictions and they are considered residential placement. They could go be part of a day treatment program, which means that the child gets picked up at home at 6 or 7 in the morning. They go to school, therapy. It could be some vocational training. It could be, whatever, substance abuse counseling. It could be whatever they need all day long. And then at 6 p.m. they return home to their family. The idea behind that is to get them out of the trouble environment during the hours they were getting in trouble. Now, because of COVID-19, that is obviously not an option. Or they could just be put on regular probation. Regular probation can be intensive, where they have to report every single day, or it could be just regular probation, where they'll report once a week or once a month, depending on the case. You can be escalated and de-escalated between regular probation, intensive probation, residential placement and a more secure type of placement. You can also be escalated and de-escalated between in unsecure, medium secure, and secure. So depending on the offense and if you are being put in a detention facility, a lot about your background is going to dictate where you go, and your background plus the crime are going to be considered always. Michigan has the second largest number of juveniles serving life offenses of any state in the United States. And a few years ago, we had some massive reform, which is now giving these non-parolable life offender juveniles, who most of them are not juveniles anymore, an opportunity to seek parole. And it's very interesting litigation that took place. And if anybody wants more information about it, let me know. If you are in a residential placement, or if you are in a secure placement like Maxie, after you're released, you will be monitored on probation. And while you are being monitored, and regardless of which one of these, it could be on probation, it could be residential, it could be secure, you're going to have what they call post-dispositional hearings, which could be every 90 days, it could be every 6 months, it could be once a year, and then eventually the case would be discharged. Juveniles are subject to penalties for violating their probation, just like adults are. And violating your probation, also one provision will always be that you listen to the rules of your parents. So that's, something that some kids really just cannot do. They don't agree with it, and they're not going to do it. The next thing that that happens in these juvenile cases is eventually the child will either age out or their case will be dismissed or discharged. Depending on the offense, a child can be under the jurisdiction, which means the supervision of juvenile court, until they're 18 or until they're 21, depending on the offense. So now let's talk a bit about juvenile detention itself, unless anybody wants to throw a question in there. I don't see any, so I'm going to just move on to juvenile detention. The age that you're considered to be a juvenile in Michigan is now 18 and under. That's new. It just changed in the last couple of months. It used to be 17. The most frequently occurring offense in juvenile court for girls is non-aggravated assault. For boys, it's theft. The other ones that are tracked are weapons offenses and drug offenses, and both girls and boys track at about the same proportion for those offenses. I guess the big news about coming out of all of this is in the last couple of weeks is on April 29th, one of the employees at Wayne County Juvenile Detention Facility, which is, for those of you that don't know, it's a really beautiful building with skylights on St. Antoine, kind of near Comerica Park, and across the street from the adult jail, and across from the Sheriff's Department and criminal court known as Frank Murphy Hall of Justice. The thing about what happened on April 29th, which is just unbelievable, is that a woman, and her name is Azanine Petty, that's spelled Azanean, and her last name is Petty, Petty, if you want to follow this story. She is suing Wayne County because on April 6th, she came to work at the detention facility, and she wanted to wear her own mask. And the supervisor said, no, you need to wear our N95 mask or leave. And she was not comfortable wearing their N95 mask. She knew that her mask was going to protect her. She knew that her mask was sterilized and was going to make her safe to go back home to her own family and her parents. And so she went to work with the intention of taking care of a bunch of youth, and left feeling she was forced to quit by making a choice between supporting her son and making sure that he's healthy versus following the rules on the kind of mask, not the kind of mask, but the source of the mask worn in the juvenile detention facility. Michigan has 25 detention facilities. They are run by courts, counties, and the one in Sault Ste. Marie is operated by the Chippewa Indian tribe. There's 2 state-operated residential facilities for youth and 21 private residential facilities across Michigan. So Maxie would be an example of a state-operated residential facility. In over the past, since 2000 and I think 2003 to 2018, there was a major push to monitor who is in juvenile detention, how long they're there, what they're there for. And there became, this is another great Google search for you, an initiative called to break the I can't believe I'm not, it's break the something to prison pipeline. So if you just Google prison pipeline, Michigan, you'll learn a lot about it. And basically what it says is that you have these kids who either are not going to school, or their parents can't help them with their homework, or they don't have resources in their home or support in their home to succeed in school. And the teachers have too many students, so they're not getting individual attention. And they studied this and correlated these kids from, a pretty young age to when they kind of took the wrong path and how they ended up in prison and re-offending as adults. And since the start of the initiative, the number of kids in detention has decreased 75% in some facilities. And if you were to do the average, all of juvenile crime has decreased in Michigan about 40%. So I think those are pretty cool numbers. I love statistics. So what does that mean, really? So if we look at, I don't want to look at that. This is nationwide, basically. There's 48,000 children confined in the United States on any given day. And there are 1,600 to 2,500 confined in Michigan on any given day. And they have tried to release as many as they can during the stay-home order. And so that also has decreased the number of youth in our detention facilities. From 2008 to 2013, which, as I said, that's part of the Prison Pipeline Initiative research, the rate declined for juvenile arrests from close to 25,000 down to a little over 10,000 in Michigan. And that's arrests, that's not detentions. And that was for kids ages 10 to 16. The 5 most common crimes, as we talked about: theft crimes, larceny, non-aggravated assault, which means there was no injury, all other offenses, narcotics law violation, and liquor law violations were that's in declining order and it was in 2003 versus 2008. 1/4 of the arrests were for larceny, as I mentioned earlier. However, if you look at the difference between girls and boys and don't look at them as a whole, you'll see that girls definitely were arrested more frequently for unaggravated assault, and boys more often for larceny. The 5 counties that were really studied in this, and every single one of them saw these declines, was the state as a whole, that saw a 39.2% decline. And then you have Wayne County had a 39.8% decline. Oakland County had a 49.2% decline. Macomb County had a 31.2% decline. Kent County had a 27.9% decline, and Genesee County had 0.2%. And I just think that those are just stunning numbers, that this is working, that we are, that if we can identify these kids and what they really need, and not just punish them, which is the adult goal, but rehabilitate them, understand them, and don't give up on them. This is a really a special, unique area of law, and it scares me that when a child's future could be affected in such grave ways that they could be forced to navigate this without a lawyer. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of programs. There's a lot of resources. And, parents are part of the team to figure it out. So parents sometimes come to me and they're like, I found this great program. I want to put my child in it. Is that going to affect them in court? And my answer is let's check it out. Let's make sure that it's legitimately what it says it is. Let's make sure that it's not just a money grab. Let's make sure that kids are coming out better than they went in. Remember, anytime you put a group of kids together who are there because they can't behave or they can't conform to society's rules, they could come out and learning worse tricks than they went in with. It's not uncommon for kids to never get out of the system once they get in. So it's so important to make sure it's handled properly from the very beginning. And so it's not just a kid thing. Juvenile court is a very creative place that, if handled properly, can really improve the lives of every child who is there. And hopefully, because they're improving, then the lives of their families are too. And so with that, if no one has any questions, I am going to remind you once again, the 5 reasons this is interesting as we get to the 5 reasons. If parents do not cooperate with their child's dispositional plan, if they're on probation or if they're in a program, a day treatment program, a residential program, or if they are in secure placement, the parents can get in trouble. And it's really been a change within juvenile court where, you're making a child responsible for going to therapy who doesn't have a driver's license, isn't old enough to take the bus by themselves. And so parents are definitely part of the plan, or some responsible caregivers, sibling, aunt, uncle, But, someone does have to be part of this as well, and they can have consequences if they're not complying. They can be held in contempt or other things. Also, this is probably my most favorite part of practicing in juvenile court and representing kids, is I get to have a conversation with them. And this is a conversation that Judge Kelly Ramsey, who is in Wayne County, now she used to be a juvenile referee when I was a baby lawyer 26 years ago. And she would ask every kid that came in her courtroom, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the child would, sometimes they knew, sometimes they didn't know. A lot of the kids didn't ever think about it because they never thought they were going to have a chance. Heartbreaking, right? And she would have a discussion with them about, oh, you want to be a fireman? Great. What do you think you need to do to be a fireman? I need to go to school. I need to go to college. I need to go to the academy, whatever it was. And then she would take that and say, okay, and when you do that, you also have to, how much effort do you have to give? And, they would say, 100%, or I'm going to have to do really well. And then she would have a conversation with them about, why you have to give your all and why you have to do 100%. And, she would ask them, so what are your grades? And they would say, whether it's A's, B's, C's, whatever. And she would say, okay, is that the best that you can do? And they would say, I could probably do a little better in this or this. And she would discuss with them about, your parents go to work every day and they have to do their best. And I'm here, as the referee, and I have to do my best to figure out how to get you through this and make sure that it doesn't happen again. So do you think that it's right or it's fair that you only get to do, what you want to do, not do your best? And it's just, it's so powerful. And I think that, parents and teachers, and we need to have these discussions, and we need to empower our kids to be the best. And if anybody wants it, I have a great poem called Mediocre that Judge Ramsey used to pass out to every single kid who came through her courtroom. And she would make them write an essay of why she gave them that poem. And basically, it was so that they could really think about how this is a world of being the best you can be. And so I think that is really super important, and especially now, as I think that, our kids without personal contact with their peers are I'm not sure that it's so real how hard they still have to work and how competition is still out there. And anyway, just some food for thought. Reasons not to harm your loved ones during quarantine. Number 1, protective services workers are essential. Number 2, the police are essential. Number 3, COVID-19 is alive, well, and a breeding ground in jails and prisons and juvenile detention facilities. And number 4, parents can get in trouble for kids being kids. And number 5, no one, if anyone, looks good in horizontal stripes. So with that, I will say goodbye for today. We'll continue talking about children in court tomorrow. And I'll see you at 1 o'clock. Have a beautiful, wonderful day. Stay home, stay healthy, and enjoy the outside. It's so nice. Bye.